Welcome back, guys, to the Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Well, last episode, after learning what happened on the night of Mr. Winterbank's murder from Gina, we returned to the courtroom just before Eggert Benedict's arrival, learning that his actual name is Ashley Graydon, who simply denied any involvement in the crime within his testimony. However, the Skulking brothers' reactions were what gave us the way forward, as Nash Skulking blurted out his concern that Mr. Graydon's gesticulation would reopen a wound he received 2 days prior, as our new witness refused to submit to inspection. And now with Inspector Gregson mysteriously having a lapse of memory about the events on the day of our first meeting with the accused, we have brought forth our knowledge of Mr. Graydon's other wound, that which left the bloodstain on the music box disc. It would appear there has been something of a misunderstanding here. I did not attempt to take the disc, as you put it. No, quite the reverse. What are you trying to say? It's really quite simple, you see. The disc was mine from the outset. Is there some crime in taking an item that you own out of pawn? What? It would seem, Mr. Graydon, that in this piece of evidence, my learned friend has established a link between yourself and the incident. Accordingly, you will tell the court everything you know about this disc now. As you wish. Though I'm quite sure it has nothing whatsoever to do with the pawnbroker's murder. Yeah, but it has interest in another case. Do you actually want to claim it's yours when it says former gilded on the back? That's really a question. The disc. There's a note on the disc saying former gilded, but the item belongs to me. The redemption ticket was stolen from me by the accused, that filthy gutling, on the day in question. I proceeded at once to the shop in order to explain my situation and redeem my article. In the end, of course, the disc was taken by the police. In other words, I had absolutely no reason to break into the shop later that same night.
Did I hear you correctly, sir? McGilded, you say? The famous London philanthropist? Who perished in this very courtroom 2 months ago after being acquitted of a distinctly messy murder?
Yes, my lord. The one and the same.
Good lord! And Mr. Graydon, are you saying that Mr. McGilded and yourself were acquainted?
Yes, that's correct.
Order! Well, I certainly didn't expect to hear that name uttered here in my courtroom again.
According to what Gina told us, this disc was placed in pawn on that fateful night 2 months ago. McGilded himself gave instructions to deposit it at Winterbank's. It's funny that Mr. Graydon here is claiming the disc belongs to him then, isn't it? In all likelihood, he's lying. So he appeared that afternoon at Winterbank's in order to get his hands on Mr. McGilded's disc for some reason.
The counsel, you will commence your cross-examination, please.
There's a note on the disc saying for McGilded, but the item belongs to me. Okay. Would you care to explain how this belongs to you? As you will observe, a communications officer such as myself commands a fine salary.
You are certainly exquisitely dressed, sir.
So you see, I have little need to make use of the services provided by the pawnbrokery trade. However, I did once find myself in difficulties having misplaced my purse whilst on an errand, which is why I pawned my fine black overcoat to the broker in question. You claim that was your overcoat? Obviously, and in my haste I clean forgot that the music disc box was in its pocket. Mind the music box disc. It'd be good if we had the music disc box right now. Was in its pocket. And yet there's a note on it that reads for McGilded. I am a collector of rare and unusual music box music. I first met Mr. McGilded at a gentleman's club in the city and was interested to discover that he shared my penchant in that area.
So, the disc in question.
It's a pre-production sample. I promise to let Mr. McGilded hear it. Then you forgot that it was in the pocket of the overcoat you were forced to pawn. Yes, exactly. Gina didn't mention any of that in her testimony 2 months ago, did she? No, because McGilded had threatened her to keep her mouth shut. Which means that if we dig too deeply here, it's going to expose Gina's perjury. Oh dear. This is complicated, isn't it? Let's leave it alone for the time being. The redemption ticket was stolen from me by the accused, that filthy gutling, on the day in question.
Hold it!
So you're saying that Mr. Strahd lifted the ticket from your pocket or bag? That's right. Despite being mindful of danger when walking in the insalubrious areas her kind frequent.
Objection!
Mr. Strahd did no such thing. Well, of course you would take that stance, but the girl is a regular offender. You came to the pawnbrokery that day prepared with all the information you needed to identify the defendant. You were looking for her. That's what brought you to Winterbanks. To get your hands on Mr. McGilder's disc.
Objection!
My learned friend is a veritable font of nonsense. Nonsense?
I concur with the prosecution. Counsel, you will refrain from conjecturing in this way. Is that clear?
Yes, my lord. Then I will continue with my testimony for what possible use it can be. I proceeded at once to the shop in order to explain my situation and redeem my article.
Hold it!
Had you ever been to Winterbanks before? Only once, for the purposes of pawning something. But like many, I enjoyed browsing in such establishments. So when you noticed that the pickpocket had taken your ticket, you chased after her. Is that correct? Yes, that's right. I did notice at first, of course. Such is the art of the pick purse. But when I did, I headed to the pawnbrokery at once, in order to reclaim my coat before the thief could. I was merely trying to recover what was rightfully mine in the first place. He can say what he likes because he knows we have no evidence to contradict him on this. In the end, of course, the disc was taken by the police.
Hold it!
Yeah, but he's, doesn't remember it. Yes, it was taken by Inspector Gregson here, wasn't it? That's right. That was the very man. Apparently, the police are collecting anything that has a connection to Mr. McGilder as evidence. What? Okay.
Excuse me.
Is that right? What? Is something wrong, Inspector?
What do you mean?
The last remark Mr. Graydon made in his testimony seemed to trouble you in some way.
No, it didn't. It's nothing. Leave it alone.
Let me ask you this, Inspector. Why is Scotland Yard gathering Mr. McGilder's possessions?
I can't tell you something like that, sunshine.
What is it, Inspector? Investigative secrets?
Yes, exactly. You should know all about that.
Magnus McGilded, who died so unexpectedly after his trial 2 months ago. A man renowned throughout the capitals for his great contributions to public life, yet he had a dark side too.
Where are you going with this, Van Zeeks?
I suppose the police are dealing with the aftermath of his nefarious activities, are they?
That's enough. Coppers like me have duties to carry out that we're not at liberty to talk about. That's all you need to know.
Duties conferred by Lord Strongheart, I presume. The Lord Chief Justice appears to have great faith in you, Inspector.
Bottom line is, if you want to get more out of me, you're gonna need Lord Strongheart's paw print first.
What's all this about? It's like there's something going on between Gregson and Lord Van Zeeks here.
Well, it would appear that the inspector had revealed all he is at liberty to reveal. Mr. Graydon, let us return to your testimony.
Gladly, my lord. In other words, I had absolutely no reason to break into the shop later that same night. I mean, you wanted something else, didn't you?
Hold it!
Can't remember what it is now. But perhaps you'd seen something of value among the forfeited items. No, not at all. Oh, wasn't there a second disc? A valuer was brought in by the police to assess everything in the shop. Without exception, every article on the shelves was common or garden bric-a-brac. In that case, it's clear. You broke into the shop later that day in order to recover Mr. McGilder's disc. Have you not been listening, man? Even if I had wanted to recover the disc, you may recall that it had been seized by the police that afternoon. There was no more in the shop that night than I. As I keep saying, I simply had no reason to break in. So there was nothing of McGilder's left in the shop that night. Nothing this man might have been after. Yes, there was. One small box. Mr. Winneback appears to have used the back of this photograph to write our redemption ticket. He's written it very neatly, but still. Perhaps he ran out of paper, so had to use anything he had to hand. It's hard to know what's the front and what's the reverse side now. So I guess it might be this, because this, when, you know, this was forfeited. Unfortunately, I can't examine what's there. Which looks like a smudge mark or a blood mark, but if you actually click on it, nothing is there. It's more smudgy here than it is elsewhere. But we know he was after something. Wasn't there another musical disc, or am I just imagining things? It's like a throwaway sentence. I mean, the box might be the music box itself. But I'm pretty sure he said there was something else too. I wonder if that's really true. Bruno, if you have some evidence, then let him have it. I'm dying to see that irritatingly assured expression of his crumble. McGilder slipped the disc into his coat pocket and had it deposited at Windibank's. Then, when he realized he was going to be arrested on suspicion of the omnibus murder, he threatened Gina and forced her to take the redemption ticket. There's no doubt about it. That witness is lying through his pearly white teeth. The police were obviously after anything left behind by McGilder's as well. That's why Inspector Gregson ended up taking the disc into custody that day. But Gregsy's been being very strange about all of this. There must be a reason for that, I'm sure. I just don't know what it is. But now I need to focus on exposing the fact that Mr. Graydon is lying in his testimony. Right, let's go to the end of the queue. No reason. You wanted the other item you were looking for is what I'm going with.
Objection!
This disc was deposited at Windibank's on Magnus McGilder's instructions. You knew that, and you went there with the intention of obtaining it for yourself.
Objection!
Conjecture again, and in any case, the disc was taken into custody by the police that afternoon. The witness had no reason to visit the pawnbrokery again that night.
Objection!
Sorry, my learned friend, but that's not true.
What?
Mr. McGilder had another article in pawn at Windibank's, as this second pawnbroker's ticket proves. Ah! There were 2 articles belonging to Mr. McGilder in Windibank's pawnbrokery, and the reason you broke into the shop that night was to recover the second one. Together with your 2 accomplices, the Skulkin brothers. Ah!
This is the second ticket, is it? What had the man deposited?
The article description reads, one small box.
A rather vague description, it seems to me.
Are you suggesting that I broke into the pawnbrokery with these clowns in order to steal some trinket box? I believe there are adequate grounds to suspect that you did. This is absurd. Why on earth would I do such a thing? Once the article had been forfeited, I could simply walk into the shop and purchase it. There would be absolutely no need for me to resort to theft. That's a good point. You already tried though, didn't you?
Oh, indeed. The witness makes a solid argument.
So that means that for some reason, this Graydon fellow needed the small box that very night, does it?
Objection!
It's time to put an end to this nonsense, my lord.
Could you be a little less cryptic, Lord Van Zeeks?
I do hate to ruin my learned friend's argument. The truth is quite incontrovertible. On the night in question, no small box was taken from Windibank's pawnbrokery. And rest assured, the prosecution can prove it. What?
Good gracious!
Inspector, show the photographic prints to the court, if you please.
Yes, sir!
What prints?
These prints were taken from one of the detective's security cameras.
Ah, Haley's red-handed recorders again. As previously explained using this plan of the shop layout, the victim's establishment was furnished with automatic cameras in 2 locations. One was set to capture the counter where Mr. Windybank received his customers, and the other was set to capture the shelves on which articles were placed for sale once forfeited.
According to the information on this ticket, the gilded small box had been forfeited already. 2 days before the incident at 9 p.m. on 13th of April to be precise. Which means it would have been on the shelves of forfeited items in the shop front. Now, what I have here is a print taken by one of the cameras about 2 hours before the incident. That's at 11 p.m. on 15th of April. The victim certainly had a very full shop, it would appear. And then here we have another print. This one was taken about 2 hours after the incident. I see. So we have 2 pictures to compare. Though I must say, the placing them side by side leaves me cold. And dear me, that's starting to make my head ache. Obviously, at Scotland Yard, we consider theft as one possible motive in this case. We explored the possibility that something had been taken in addition to the victim's life. So your men have already compared these 2 prints thoroughly, Inspector? Yes, sir! We counted every single item in each of these 2 photographic prints. And the Yard's conclusion is that exactly the same number are present in both. In other words, nothing was taken from the pawnbrokery on the night in question. And my learned friend's assertion is nothing more than a hopeful fantasy. Ah!
I don't believe it. If I could have just shown that he'd stolen McGilda's pawned box, I might have been able to break him down at last. You know what, Bruno? I've been thinking. I wonder if these 2 photographs really are exactly the same. What?
So, counsel, in the light of the evidence put forward by the prosecution, what is your position? It seems that in fact on the night in question nothing was stolen from the victim's establishment. Do you accept the prosecution's assertion?
I don't know. Could there be some hidden discrepancy in these 2 photographic prints somewhere? I mean, I guess we know exactly what we want to do because the game's just going, oh, stereoscope! Stereoscope! So I guess it's not a discrepancy. It is to use the evidence, yes? Before I give my answer, my lord, I'd like to try something if I may.
Try something? What do you mean, counsel?
I'll need to use a certain piece of evidence from the court record to identify the discrepancy.
I'm not entirely sure I follow. Which piece of evidence do you intend to use to help you identify a discrepancy between the 2 prints?
Take that!
I'd like to use this device, my lord, to view the 2 prints stereoscopically. Ooh! Yes, you've caught the bug at last! You can't resist it, can you? You've got the cross-eyed compulsion! Juror number 3, what a surprise! Come on, Bruno. Let's put the pictures in place and see what this wonderful contraption shows us. There we go. Now, look for the eyepiece. I wasn't sure at first, but there's a clear discrepancy between these 2 prints.
What? You must identify the location in question for the court, counsel. Indicate the precise location of the discrepancy of which you speak. That precise enough?
Take that!
Granted, these two prints are almost identical. However, there is one minor discrepancy between them.
What?
When you view the two pictures stereoscopically, you could see it without as well, by the way. Now that you know it's there. A single area stands out as being different. The location of this small box.
Let me... Wait. Unbelievable! By Jove, you're right! How extraordinary!
What this tells us is very simple. Mr. McGilder's small box was indeed not stolen from Windibanks on the night in question. However, there can be no doubt that somebody picked up this particular box and then returned it to its place on the shelves.
Are you suggesting that the small box originally deposited by Mr. McGilder is in fact...
Yes, the very same small box I just identified in those photographic prints.
Objection!
Mindless guesswork. What if it was?
So a box was moved on the shelf, nothing was stolen, which means, quite simply, that nothing has changed. That may be true, but... Alright, McGilder's box wasn't stolen then. But doesn't the fact that it was moved like that change things? I mean, yeah. Simply put. Though it's such a strong statement, be like, it changes nothing! It changes everything! Just, yes, it'll be fine. I believe this changes everything about the case.
How can that possibly be?
The crucial point is the fact that what was moved was a small box. In other words, we have to consider what might have been inside that box.
What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that we need to examine that box as soon as possible. A vital piece of evidence is sitting on the shelves at Windibanks as we speak.
Objection!
That won't be necessary. Some little box belonging to a man who died 2 months ago can't possibly be relevant to this trial. The court does not uphold your objection, Lord Van Zeeks. Bailiff, arrange for an officer to go to Baker Street at once. Obtain the small box in question and bring it back here for further examination. We should have a report within half an hour. I think perhaps we should recess for a short while until the evidence is brought forth.
Be hoodwinked by such a farce.
Disappointing. I beg your pardon, Lord Van Zeeks.
This is nothing but a smokescreen. A Nipponese speciality, it would seem. What are you trying to say? My learned friend has persisted with the same line of reasoning from the very beginning. This witness's intent was to steal an article belonging to Mr. McGilder from the pawnbrokery. Yet common sense tells us that none of the articles have value enough to be worth stealing in the first place.
Exactly! It would be beyond absurd to break into the place for a purpose of stealing such commonplace property.
If your lordship recalls, Mr. McGilder perished 2 months ago immediately after the conclusion of his trial. A trial in which he was found not guilty. A trial in which it was established he was the upstanding member of society his reputation implied, in fact. So I propose a toast to my learned friend and his most insightful defense. The articles this upstanding member of society pawned were entirely ordinary. A black overcoat that just happened to have a music box disc in one of its pockets and a small box. I assure you, I wouldn't accept even if the man tried to make a gift of such things to me.
You know, that does make rather a lot of sense.
It's not as if it was gold or jewels, is it? Though, goodness knows Mr. McGilder was rich enough. You can't deposit cash at a pawnbrokery, I'm quite certain of that.
The prosecution's argument is undeniably compelling. It is incumbent on the defense now to bolster its argument. To explain what possible significance these commonplace articles pawned by this fine citizen could have. Well, counsel, is your argument in fact demonstrable? Are you able to show proof that the disc or the box are in any tangible way related to this case?
Well, what's the matter, Runo? We know that they're related, don't we? They're both vital pieces of evidence. Yes, of course. You and I both know that. We know McGilder's true character, and we know the disc is significant, even if we don't know why. But if we explain all that to the court at this point, we'll have to acknowledge that McGilder's acquittal 2 months ago was a mistake. That the defense's argument was flawed, based on false information. You mean tell the truth? Oh no! And that would mean admitting that Gina committed perjury. But Guinea, could it be that Van Zieks knows? Is that why he's doing this now? Because he anticipated everything? But maybe this could be a great opportunity for us. Sorry, what do you mean, Iris? Well, what is it that you always say, Runo? Sooner or later, the truth comes out. Every time. Alright, the exact significance of the things that McGilder deposited with Mr. Winterbank is something that only Gina can explain to the court. But if I put her on the stand to testify about that, it could critically damage our chances of winning this case. What's the right thing to do here? You have to take a gamble, because otherwise she's going down anyway, right? I mean, perjury's not murder? I'd have to assume it has a lower sentence, but we'll see. My lord, the defense would like to make a proposal.
Oh? What proposal, counsel?
While the court awaits the arrival of Mr. McGilder's small box, I would like to call the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade, to the witness stand.
The defendant? To what end?
It's to do with the various articles deposited at Winterbanks by Mr. McGilder, my lord. Mr. Lestrade has information relating to them. I believe it would be beneficial for the court to hear what she has to say. It will prove the significance of the articles in question, once and for all.
Well, things are becoming interesting. I presume you've considered the implications of the testimony you're proposing. In particular, the impact it will have on the accused's standing, and indeed your own.
I have.
Lord Van Zieks, would you care to explain that last remark? The prosecution accepts the defense's proposal. I move to interrupt the cross-examination of the current witness and hear from the accused herself. Very well, if you have no objection. So the court will now hear the testimony of the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade. You witnesses currently in the stand may step down until further notice.
Then I shall bid you good day.
Wait. You, sir, shall remain in the stand while Miss Lestrade testifies.
As you wish. Alright then, Gina, it's time. I know this will be hard, but please, put your faith in me here. Good luck, Runo. The articles that Mr. McGilder had deposited in Winterbank's pawnbrokery are intimately related with the omnibus case, the trial of which was heard in this courtroom 2 months ago.
Yes, and I remember this young lady being brought before me in that trial as well.
That's right, my lord. Her testimony helped to establish the innocence of the defendant, Mr. McGilded.
The omnibus case was intriguing, to say the least. And now here we are all again. The same players in that trial, facing each other once more. A twist of fate, perhaps, my Nipponese friend.
Allow me to recap the events of 2 months ago. So if we're going to get into this, we should begin the recap next time on the Great Ace Attorney Adventures, because we're always looking for a bit more of a natural stopping point for the beginning of the next part, so to say. So with Gina called to the stand, we possibly incriminate her in one thing to get her out of possibly a worse thing. Depends how things rank in a court of law and how the judge feels about it all. To really get to the bottom, the truth of not just the case we're currently in, but the case, the mistrial of times past. Join me next time for more, and I'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.